Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi, my name is Michael O'Keefe. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. Oh, my home group? I'm homeless. Well, it's really great to be here tonight. Before I say anything about my own story, I just want to say how much I enjoyed Alan and how much courage I thought it took for him to share that story with us, and how valuable it is for us as addicts and alcoholics to have heard that, and how hopefully transformative the telling of that story might be over the years for him and for all of us. I was really moved by that. I usually start out by talking about my family because it had a lot to do with my drinking. My father, Ray, has about 31 years of sobriety, and he's like what they call a circuit speaker in AA, He's kind of like a Clancy of the East Coast, For those of you that don't like Clancy, I know how you feel. My mother, Stephanie, has about 17 years of sobriety. My brother Billy has, I think he has 17 years, and my sister Ann has 18 years of sobriety. My brother Kevin has 17 years, and my sister Mary has 17 years. My brother James has 12 years. My brother John is scared shitless. I haven't done any drinking or drugging since December 13th, 1979. I come from an alcoholic family. It was really heavy in my house when I grew up. My father's a professor of law, and for those of you who are familiar with the university system, he had tenure, which means you cannot be fired. It's a lifetime guarantee. He was fired. Because of his drinking and his drugging. He basically would teach, I think it was 6 hours a week of classes, which left him 172 hours in the week to drink and ignore his family. And he was, for 6 hours a week of teaching, he was fired for non-performance. He taught in a blackout his last 2 years. He does not remember ever going to school, and he does not remember ever coming home. And when people see him on the street that were his students back then, and they try and recall or help him recall them, he always has a pat line, which is class of 66, huh? Because he knows if he doesn't know him, he was probably drinking back then. He terrorized us as kids, and injected a great instability and a great fear and a great problem into our family because of his alcoholism. I want to tell you before I go any further that I have no rancor in my heart for my father. I really don't dislike him. I really love him a lot. but I'm very aware of the effect that his alcoholism had on us as kids. And I had an interesting reaction to it. It was interesting to me, and I'm kind of hoping it will be to you. I had a dream when I was about 3 years old, and in the dream, I was asleep, and my mother was sitting on my right-hand side. My father came into the room, and his head was shaved, and he was drunk, and he was angry. And just before he came in, my mother said, you know, if you just go to sleep, it'll be okay. Just pretend you're asleep. And he came into my room in this dream, and he really tried to scare the shit out of me, and I just pretended I was asleep. And he went away. I was about 3 at the time, and I had already learned a very valuable lesson about how I was going to survive in an alcoholic household. I was going to be asleep. I was going to just go to sleep when things got rough. And I did that, and I made probably a subconscious choice at the age of 3 to do it, but that's what happened. And by the time I was 12, my father had finally wrestled his demons and come to terms with himself and his alcoholism, was ready to admit his problem, and after about 10 months of sobriety, got drunk again, went back into rehab, came out, and began to live a sober life. And accrue a great gift as a speaker in AA. And by the way, I'm not trying to take anything away from Clancy either. I mean, I think he's a phenomenon. And those speakers that have that kind of power and that kind of gift serve a great purpose in AA. And I was fortunate to have my father as one of those people, and I got to hear him speak a lot. And the next significant incident in my life at the age of 12 was that, of course, I started drinking. And I, did not grow up on the rough and tumble streets of New York City. I was not in a gang. I never wore leather. I wore shirts with alligators on them. I had pennies in my loafers. They were Bass-Weegians. We lived in Larchmont, New York. We lived across the street from the Larchmont Yacht Club. When I was 12, one of the most humiliating rituals that I had to endure was to go to the Honey Adams School of Dance. We would learn to foxtrot, to samba, all the latest dances. We had to wear white gloves and suits, and the girls wore little dresses and patent leather shoes, and we bowed to them before we asked them to dance. And then we would go and Honey and her minions would instruct us in the fine art of ballroom dancing. Honey looked a little bit like Betty Davis in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. It's pretty traumatic for my first drunk to look up into her eyes, Ah! And we stole a quart of Jameson Irish whiskey from a friend of mine's house. I drank it, about half of it with him. I was about 5 feet tall, I would imagine, at that age. Probably weighed about 100 pounds, and I had a quarter of a quart, pretty good chunk of Jameson in me. Honey was trying to instruct me in I don't remember really, some sort of arm placement for the foxtrot. She annoyed me. I dropped my pants and exposed myself to Honey. As a sign of respect for her authority. And I was asked to leave the Honey Adams School of Dance and never to return. Which is where it all went wrong for me somehow. And when I got home that night, my mother, we had a way of greeting my mother when we came in at that age. We were young enough so that she was still concerned about us and wanted to supervise us a little bit. And so you had to come upstairs and you had to knock on her door and you had to say, "Mom, I'm home," and then you could go upstairs and go to bed. And my bedroom was way up on the 3rd floor of this rather huge house. And I didn't knock on the door, and she heard me kind of stumbling up the stairs, and so was immediately concerned and suspicious, came to see what was wrong with me, asked me what was happening, and I said nothing, and then I just puked everywhere, mostly on her. And the what was really striking about it was the look in her face. She had just witnessed her husband go through bankruptcy, a loss of tenure, delirium tremens. It was bad, you know. I mean, it was about as bad as you'd ever want it to get, and had finally borne him out, as it were. You know, I mean, really drew him back into the world with a commitment to him and to the family, only to find her eldest son retching at the top of the stairs. She was really grief-stricken, and it was this mixture of shame and regret and power over her at that moment that I felt. And I think those were the three things that really lasted longer than almost any other feeling I had when I was drinking. Certainly the next day. It was the combination of shame and regret and the power of the experience and the illusion that I thought it was giving me power over other people and powers that I didn't possess that kept bringing me back to drinking and drugging. I started taking drugs when I was about 14. By the time I was 19, I was a daily user of whatever you had. You had it, I tried it. You know, it really didn't matter to me. I was under the impression, especially in this time, it was the late 60s and the early 70s, and I was under the impression that that smoking pot and taking acid and doing those things was really a form of self-expression and a kind of political insight. Perhaps some of you share that delusion. There was an initiation that was happening for a lot of people through the use of drugs and alcohol, and certainly it was like that for me. My faith in Catholicism at the time had paled, and I was not particularly interested in the way that the church was relating to me. I had been confirmed. I had gone through their initiation experience. It didn't seem to really resonate with me. And the drug culture really did. It spoke to me. It attracted me. It pulled me in ways that I wanted to be pulled, and then shaped me in ways that I had no idea it was capable of shaping me. And I considered myself on my best game. I was happening at the age of 19. And every time I did anything, it was because it was the right thing to do, and I knew what I was doing. My parents did not raise powerless children. That was not the way we were taught to be. We were righteous. We had our way of being. And there was really nothing you could say to me to change my mind about most topics. And because I was an unemployed actor, I, of course, was an expert on most topics. And whether or not you wanted to know it, I would be happy to expound on any number of topics that happened to be prevalent at the day. And by the time I was 24 years old, it was a very, very interesting thing that happened to me. I became very successful as an actor. I was making way, way too much money. And as Robin Williams once said, cocaine is God's way of telling you you are making too much money. I had at the age of 23 everything I had ever wanted out of my desire to be an actor. I had everything that, in a sense, at that age, you were capable of getting. I had recognition, I had some fame, I had a really, really nice girlfriend who I was holding hostage with threats of marriage. She was just the sweetest, most endearing, loyal person, and I was just completely ruining her life and taking advantage of her and really putting her in a between a rock and a hard place does not even begin to describe the kind of torture I was putting her through. And, You know, in fairness to myself, and in fairness to you, I have to say that I really was overwhelmed by my life at that point. And I really did not know how to handle all the success that I was accruing, and I did not know how to relate to it, and I did not understand that there was such a thing as perspective during this experience. It was the eye of the hurricane. And, you know, I could see Margaret Hamilton on the broom going around me in circles, you know. And I could see all the furniture, and I could see Auntie M and the farm just spinning around me in that maelstrom of success, you know. I had no idea what was happening. And I was doing a film, and I had an opportunity in this picture that was really great, and, you know, I was totally stoned and refusing to go on camera unless the ADs found me below. You know, really charming things like that, you know. Really endearing, responsible, professional attitudes like that. And I was in a hotel room in Florida, and, you know, the cocaine on this movie, I mean, they budgeted it into the movie. Miscellaneous expenditures, $133,000. I mean, it was in Salt Shakers in the catering place when we went for lunch. You know what I mean? I mean, it was really, this movie was packed. And I was in a hotel room, and I was totally gone, and I was sitting in a chair, and I was looking out onto this golf course, and I just went into this huge spasm in the chair. Like this, just, you know. I blacked out, and I kind of woke up, and I had one really clear, cogent thought. Man, I am just not high enough. You know, I gotta score, because this is not right. You know, I have got to fix this problem, you know. What's wrong with this picture? It was really bad. And, you know, fortunately, I had a family that had a lot of sobriety and had a lot of time. And I went to them, and you know, I was able to put myself in their hands. And my sister Ann had already, I don't know, had about like 9 months, and my brother Kevin had about 6. And, you know, my father at that point, you know, I don't know, he had like 15 years, you know, and my mother was actually chairman of Al-Anon for a while, you know what I mean? It was really clear what was happening to me, you know. It wasn't like a mystery. Gee, I wonder what's wrong, you know. Duh. You know, and I had that realization when I was 19. I knew it. You know, I saw it, the writing on the wall. And I consciously ignored that insight until I was 24 years old. I purposefully put it aside for another 5 years because I was young. And I'm here to tell you that if you're in that position and you're young and you're under the impression that you've got a few more recoveries in you, don't do it, man. Don't put yourself through that. And don't overestimate yourself or what life is really about. Because then you'll be up here telling stories about how someone you know didn't make it because of you. Or you won't make it. Or you'll end up fried or baked, babbling to yourself about what you think could or could not be better about the universe. And it'll be a tragedy. And you don't have to go through that. We've been through it for you. We know. And we're back, and we're here to tell you it's not worth it. And for all of the romantic, over-glorified crap that was ever written about drugs and alcohol, I'm here to tell you that it just ain't that good. You know, it does not pay off. It's a guise, it's a con, and it's the ultimate one. Because somehow we get convinced that we're more powerful behind it all. I went through a period of time where I actually, I was under the impression, because of the fact that I had taken a lot of LSD, that I had special powers. You know, I didn't need the keys to start my car. If you and I were spending any time together at that time and we were over at your house and, you know, your phone was out of order, I could fix it for you. I would come over to your phone and your phone would be fixed. I did a series of experiments to document these special powers that I accrued. They were of an empirical nature, scientifically controlled. I put a tape recorder on a table in front of me. Then I would place, I don't know, like a glass in front of me. And then I would concentrate on moving the glass. You know, of course, the acid helped, you know. And I would talk into the tape recorder. I'm concentrating on the glass. I have the glass in my grasp. The glass is moving. The glass is moving. These are being sold at the end of the meeting for $5 a piece. And I do keep all the money. God, it's so embarrassing. You know, I really believed in myself, you know. I got to tell you, man, I really believed it. You know, and if you asked me what was happening at the time, I would have told you things were just great. You know, I'm into some really cool stuff. You know, and this is me, man. I have found myself. You know, it was really a waste. So much time, you know, so much time lost. There's a great story about the the historical Buddha. He was at a river and he wanted to cross, and there was a ferry, and there was a yogi by the riverside with him, and the yogi recognized the Buddha, who was the world-renowned one, and said, "So, Buddha, you're gonna take the ferry, huh?" The Buddha said, "Yeah, I am. I'm going to the other side." He said, "Okay, I'll see you over there." And the Buddha got on the ferry, and then he looked down, and while they were in midstream, there was the yogi walking on the water. And he got to the other side. And the Buddha said, "You know, that was pretty impressive. How'd you do it?" And the yogi said, "You know, it took me 25 years to learn how to do that." And the Buddha said, "Really, you know, that's too bad. You could have been helping a lot of people." You know, so this idea about special power, you know, whether it's, you know, telekinetic, whether it's making a lot of money, whether or not it's attracting the current rage of your passion, whoever or whatever that might be, you know, it's really not necessary. You know, all the real special power that I need right now is a really good cup of coffee. You know? And even that needs to be kept in check. So when I came here, it was really clear that I was powerless over alcohol and drugs, you know. There was no mystery to me. I had slept my way through some of the most valuable and interesting times of life. You know, for about half of my life so far up to that point on the planet, I had been asleep. I had been nodding off one way or the other. Spiritually, physically, emotionally, and mentally. And I got here and I got my wake-up call. And what happened is that when I found out I was powerless over alcohol and drugs, they ceased to hold their power over me. And another power came into my life, and I was granted a reprieve from my alcoholism and my drug addiction. And I was given an opportunity to admit that I was an alcoholic and a drug addict. And I took this opportunity. And because of this personal powerlessness and the paradoxical nature of the power that began to flow into my life because of that, I came to believe that there is a power greater than myself and that it was restoring me to sanity. I accepted who I was. I accepted that I was sick, that I needed help, and that I could not do it alone. And perhaps, if anything, for me, that's one of the most important aspects about what AA has to offer. I just walked a friend of mine through a rehab recovery, and it was not for alcoholism and drug addiction. He had been drinking, and he's a very close friend of mine. He's an incredible writer, very gifted guy, very smart. And he had been drinking and drinking for a long time, you know. And I'd been just trying to be there for him as much as I could. He took a fall down a flight of stairs. He was laid at the bottom of the stairs bleeding for a day and a half before they found him. He had brain damage. His liver and his kidney were damaged. He went into the hospital. He made it out. And he had to go through this entire rehab of relearning all of the objects in the world. He couldn't say that this was a podium and that this was a microphone and that you were people. And if he knew you, he couldn't recognize you. He had to relearn everything about his life. And after that whole period of adjustment and spending weeks with him in the hospital, his friends and I, and his family and I sat down and we said, you know, this is probably a good time for you to go into rehab, and he was not having any of it. Because he was convinced he could do it on his own. And he was convinced that he'd gone as far as he was going to go and that everything would be okay. You know, and a month later, he was in the Bel Air Hotel, just 5 days drunk, plowed. And because of the pressure in his brain, you know, the one glass of wine, he might have had 3 bottles at that point. You know, but he was going to do it alone. He was convinced. Well, you know, I'm here to tell you, it could happen. And it didn't happen for me. And, you know, in the final analysis, I don't think we do anything in this world alone, ever. And because I got this opportunity to be accepted into the fellowship of AA, and because I was returning to sanity gradually, of course that's like on a sliding scale, on a bell curve, you know. All of us that have been sober for a while have a certain amount of sanity, you know, compared to everybody else. No hope. But, you know, I have a certain amount of sanity in my life. And because of that, I made this decision to turn my life and my will over to the care of God as I understood Him at the time. You know, that's changed for me a lot over the years. And it's a very personal and a very private and a very intimate experience to make this decision. But you do not have to have absolute knowledge of God to do it. You just need to make a decision that you will do it. And it will be revealed to you in time that this simple act of making the decision, this act brought about by the faith that you experience in the second act, in the second step, is a kind of determination. And it's a great determination. It's the determination that the great mystics and the great saints rely on. It's the spiritual determination to find out who you are when there's no way of knowing. Because nobody with any concept of God is going to finally tell you who God is. You know, and if you're looking for a miracle in AA, this is it. Being here is the miracle, and we miss it. And I don't know if you're like me, but I miss it because I want something more spectacular. I want the Rolling Stones in my miracle. I want 100,000 people, and I want to be in like Yankee Stadium. I want the lights to go up, you know, and I want them to start singing Rave On. And then that, you know, to my mind, oh, that's miraculous, you know, but no, you know, this is it. This is the miracle. You get to be on the planet. You're on Earth. That's a miraculous experience. The sun rises, the sun sets. Spring comes and there's flowers on the trees. Fall comes and they turn orange and they fall off. And in winter, the trees look dead. And in spring again, the trees bloom. And that's miraculous. And we miss it. You know, we misuse it. We see the trees as like a potentially good floor in our house. and the water is something to clean our car with. That's not what that is. It's miraculous. And when I started to appreciate my life that way, my life really changed. And I took this inventory that's recommended, and I sat down with my sponsor at the time, who was a professional gambler. His name was East Coast. And he took my itinerary, my inventory, and he said, "Well, I'm taking a look at this, and I got to say, I see a theme here. Do you have any clue, like what the theme could be?" And I said, "No, not really. I don't really, no. And can you stop bugging me, man?" And he said, "Well, the theme here is fear." He said, "You're afraid of everything and everybody, and mostly you are afraid of yourself. You're afraid of what you think you're capable of. You're afraid of what you've done. You're afraid of what you might do. You're chicken shit," is what he was saying, So I kicked his ass. Sorry. And I really had no comeback, you know what I mean? I had nothing to say to the guy, you know what I mean? I did not have a witty retort. I did not have an arrogant posture to cop. I was nailed to the spot, He was right. I was scared of everything. And because I was scared, I had all these character defects, I was a liar. I was a liar. I'm a liar. If you want to hear some bullshit, please just get my phone number afterwards. I am a liar. I am a manipulator of people, places, and events based on my fears. I will steal, and I have stolen in the past because I'm scared. When it comes down to, for me now, and I, of course I didn't have this perspective at the time, what was this fear really? What was it? And for me, it was a sense of separateness. I really thought that I had to look outside myself to get what I needed, that it had to be done through your recognition of me and my work, that somebody had to give me money, and somebody else had to give me a car for that money, or a house, or a date, or their friendship, and I thought it was all outside of myself for some reason. I thought it was beyond my reach, and I had to struggle for it, and I had to scrap for it, and I had to dig for it, and I didn't. And the great message of the spiritual practice that you learn in AA is that everything you need, everything you've ever dreamt of, beyond your dreams, it's within you right now. Right here. You don't have to look outside yourself. And if you're looking to embrace God in prayer and meditation, do what all the great masters have done through the years. Embrace yourself. Don't look any further than you have to look. Don't put a burden on yourself that's never going to be fulfilled. You're not going to find anything outside of yourself that you don't already have. Because you're not going to find anything outside of yourself. And when I got to that point where I really felt like I knew what that meant in my life, believe me when I tell you, I wanted to be rid of these character problems. And I was ready. And I'm ready now. And I'm ready on a daily basis. And on one of the contingencies of my freedom from these defects of character is my readiness. And I have no responsibility for the freedom that I get from these character defects. Because the power that frees me from them is not me. It's not Michael. When I got to this point in the program, it's recommended that we make a list of the people we've harmed and we make amends to them. And I did that, and I still have to do it. And I still have to do it on a daily basis sometimes. And in a way, it's for these people that we go to. It's for them. We go to them and we try and put right what we did wrong. And there's that great story about Dr. Bob going around mending fences, that old Yankee terminology. When he finally got the message that he needed to take a look at himself, and he went around and he tried to mend the fences that he'd broken in his community. We need to do that. But in the final analysis, for me, it comes down to being about this experience, at least of the ninth step, is really for us. Because we've got to become accountable for our lives and our actions. We've got to be responsible to the people that we have an effect on, whether they're our family, our friends, our enemies, our community, our nation, because there's no difference between them and us. Because there is nothing separating us from them. Because really, that's who we are. Because all of us are united in body and mind and spirit. And the only boundaries between us now are the ones that we place there. And the freedom that we have from these boundaries is contingent upon our ability to recognize the spiritual nature of our existence here, and certainly the spiritual practice that AA has to offer. You know, and so because of that, I try to take a daily inventory of myself when I meditate and when I pray, and I try and recognize when I've acted in error, when I've acted in ignorance, and what actions led to that, and what consciousness was accrued from that, and how did I separate myself from that person? And what did I do to separate myself from them that I thought I could lie to them or use them or hurt them or take something from them? And how did it happen? Did I see it, smell it, feel it, touch it, taste it? What happened? What was the contact like? What kind of sensation did I get? Was it pleasurable? Was it painful? Was it shameful? Was it powerful? Do I want more? And because of all that, am I under the illusion that I'm the only one here? And then I'm the only one who counts? Or that someday I'm actually going to die? Or that I was born and that I'm somehow separate from the source of what the life that I'm living is? Because I'm not, and neither are you. And nobody is. You know, that's the great fact. That's the great continuity of life. You know, it's all one thing. And it doesn't matter what you use to get there or how you experience that oneness, but you need it. And you need to do it on a daily basis. Because without it, you get away from the source of who you are and what you are. And then, you know, as the Buddha said, you fuck up. So I try to practice the principles of this program, you know. And I try to be there for people. And I try to share my experience and my strength and my hope. You know, and my hope for you is that you won't have to go through what I went through to get here. And that you won't have to leave to find out that you need to come back. Because you're not going anywhere outside of these rooms. Nobody is. You know, and in a sense, we're really fortunate that it's alcoholism and that it's drug addiction that's brought us into these rooms, because it's a tangible form of addiction. Because to live is to be addicted to something, as far as I can tell, and to suffer from it. And because of that ignorance, our lives are ruled by desires. But there's a way out. And that's the path. That's the way. You know, that's what AA is. And when you turn around to look behind you, you'll see that the way out was never really a way out of anywhere, and that there was no path behind you. And all you did was finally come home. So, welcome home.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.